Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let us continue with the tafsir of Surah Aal-Imraan bihawlillahi wa quwwatih, ayah number 26. قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. So in this ayah, the Prophet is ordered to make this following dhikr. Allahumma, we have spoken about this before, it means Ya Allah. Malik al-Mulk, owner of the Mulk, which is dominion. So what he's talking about is all of existence, the whole of this universe and other than that. Allah owns it all. Tu'ti, from ata yu'ti, ita'an, to give. You give the dominion to whomsoever you will. So this means certain people Allah Jalla wa Ala can appoint as kings, and there could be other people who have authority in the land. All the authority in the land which anyone has been granted to them by Allah Jalla wa Ala. وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ نَزَعَ يَنْزَعُ, to extract something. You extract the dominion from whomsoever you want, meaning you deprive them of their authority in the land. وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ, you give izzah to whomsoever you will. This means honor and might. وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ, this is the opposite. Idlal means to make someone humiliated. So giving the izzah would be like making a person into a prophet or a messenger, and indeed it would be making a person into a mu'min as well. This is also izzah. The opposite, idlal, would be to make somebody into a kafir. بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرِ, in your hand is all goodness, meaning all the dominion, all the riches, being able to guide people, being able to take people to account, just any type of goodness you can think of, it is in the possession of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Indeed, you are able to do all things. That is clear enough. Let us reflect on this ayah. In this ayah, Allah is teaching the Prophet to depend upon Allah Jalla wa Ala, and that Allah will make His deen dominant over the kuffar and the kufr worldview, and that He is the one who will give honor to the Muslimin. As we learn from this ayah that Allah owns all of the dominion, all of this universe, not just planet Earth, but everything in the cosmos and beyond. And He alone gives authority to whomsoever He wills, and takes authority away from whomsoever He wills. And in this ayah there is a lesson to those who are in positions of power and in positions of authority. Whether they are kings or presidents or prime ministers, it makes no difference. If you have a share of authority in the land, then you need to realize that it is Allah alone who has conferred this upon you. And so you need to humble yourself and not act arrogantly, and rather be grateful. We learn that Allah is the one who possesses all goodness. But then one might say, is evil not the same thing? That in the hands of Allah there is also evil. So when negative things happen, do they not happen because Allah has willed them to happen, just like the goodly things? The answer is yes, of course. Even the evil things which happen are by the qadr of Allah, of course. However, He does not mention that in His hands there is evil, because evil is not ascribed to Allah in the same way goodness is ascribed to Allah. So we say in Allah's hand is all goodness. We do not say in Allah's hand is all evil, despite the fact that Allah does decree evil things to happen. But evil which is decreed by Allah is not purely evil. There is wisdom behind this evil. So in other words, it is good from a particular angle. Because with this evil, Allah Jalla wa Ala is fulfilling a particular purpose. And if someone says, but then is Allah not capable of creating a world where everything is just good, pure goodness and no evil? Seeing as though Allah Himself is good, why does He not create a perfect world with just goodness? We say, yes, He has created such a thing. It's called Jannah. And He has also told us how to enter it. As for Jahannam, then this is not an evil place per se, but rather this is a place of justice, where the kuffar are given only justice. And we also learn the obvious lesson that Allah is able to do all things. And of course these are all things which are not logical absurdities, such as Allah doing something to go against His own nature, such as, is Allah able to make Himself sleep? Well, the thing is that if Allah sleeps, then Allah is no longer Allah anymore. You're talking about something else. So how is Allah supposed to be Allah and not Allah at the same time? You see, then it becomes a logical absurdity. So when we say all things, we mean all things as long as they are not logical absurdities. They can be miracles, they can be above the scientific understanding of mankind, but they're not allowed to be logical absurdities. We ask a question, is this ayah, which is clearly a dhikr, is it a dua? Are you asking Allah for anything? We say, in terms of the words, it is clearly a dhikr. You're not actually asking Allah for anything. However, the meaning behind this dhikr is actually a talab, a request, an asking. You're asking Allah Jalla wa Ala to grant you dominion in the land, to grant you honor, and to save you from being humiliated. You are actually asking Allah Jalla wa Ala in effect, even though the words per se are not words of request or words of dua. Let's take ayah number 27. تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. So this dhikr from the last ayah actually continues on. تولج from أولج يولج إيلاجا means to insert something into something else. You insert the night into the day and the day into the night. So the night meaning from Maghrib till Fajr, and the day meaning from the Fajr going back up till the Maghrib. And then he says you bring out the living from the dead and the dead from the living. Okay, so what does all that mean? Well, we can give examples to illustrate this matter. The living come from the dead. So we can see that the human being, or the embryo if you like, which is formed in the belly of the mother, that is a living thing when the soul is blown into it after 120 days. But where did it come from? It came from the fluid of the male and the female, but the fluid itself is dead. It's not a living thing. And then you can talk about the dead coming from the living. So from the living, the fluid itself is dead. It comes from the living. We can talk about the seed. The seed itself is dead, but then it gives rise to the plants, which are living. And then the plants or fruits give rise to the seeds, which themselves are not living. And so it's that cycle. And then of course you've got the age-old classical example of the chicken and the egg. The chicken is a living thing. It comes from the egg. Egg is a dead thing, but the egg comes from the chicken, so the dead coming from the living. And no, do not worry. We are not going to ask you which came first, the chicken or the egg, because that level of knowledge is just something special. Then he goes on to say, وَتَرْزُقُ رَزَقَ يَرْزُقُ رِزْقًا, to grant provision. So rizq means provision. It could be food, but other than that as well. It's all types of provision. Your spouse, which Allah has given you, that's also from the rizq. Your children are also from the rizq. بِغَيْرِ حِسَاب, without counting, or we can say without limit. We can also understand بِغَيْرِ حِسَاب as in without wanting anything in return. So without any muhasabah. So He does not charge you anything for what He gives you. So reflecting on this ayah, we take again the perfect dominion and authority and possession of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and that it is Allah alone who manages the affairs of His creation, such as inserting the day into the night and night into the day, and maintaining this cycle. And again, in this day and age, you're likely to find people saying that this cycle of night and day can be explained scientifically. We do not see some kind of divine hand at work. And we've spoken about this before, but we say yes, it can be explained scientifically, but the fact that there are scientific laws governing the universe, that needs to be pondered on. Why is that the case? Did that have to be the case? Why are we living in such a governed universe in the first place, which actually has scientific laws? And again, like we said before, the kuffar here is going to hide behind the chance hypothesis. He's going to say, well, that's just the chance. It's the way it is. It just happened to happen that way. And what's funny is that he will never use the chance hypothesis anywhere else. It will only be to reject the existence of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And there is nothing much you can do or say to a person like this. He's basically showing you that his heart is sealed. We take that he brings out the living from the dead and vice versa. We gave some examples, but actually we can give a spiritual type of example as well. If a kafir becomes a Muslim, then as a Muslim he is spiritually alive, and as a kafir he was spiritually dead. So the alive came from the dead. And then vice versa. If a Muslim embraces kufr, then he was alive and he became dead. So the dead came out from the living. So there is the more spiritual example that can be given, as well as the physical example. We also take that Allah grants provisions to whomsoever He wills, which means that all provisions are in the hands of Allah. So from this, if we truly internalize this ayah, we find that our hearts are hinged on Allah Jalla wa Ala for our provisions. They are not hinged on any human being, or maybe your employer who gives you your wages. No, your heart should not be hinged on your employer, rather only on Allah Jalla wa Ala. And like we said before, this ayah does not make a request or a dua in terms of the words, but the meaning behind the words is a dua. So you are making a dua for rizq in this ayah. Let's take ayah 28. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير. He's saying to us that the mu'minun, coming from the word iman, which we have spoken about before, must not take from yattakhidhu, ittikhadh, to take, must not take the kafirin from kufr, we have spoken about that before, as awliya. This is the plural of wali. This means a supporter and a helper. So the word wala has this mixture of love, closeness and help. So a person who has these three for you is your wali, the plural being awliya. So as a basic translation, we could say close friends or close supporters or allies. So they must not take the kuffar as their allies instead of the mu'mineen. And he says, whoever does this, فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. It literally translates to, then he is not from Allah in aught. But this would not make sense. What it actually means is that such a person is not from the deen of Allah, meaning the deen of Al-Islam, in aught. And also that he is not from the protection of Allah. So such a person will not be helped by Allah in aught. He makes an exception, illa, except an tattaqu minhum, that you have taqwa from them, meaning you protect yourself from them, tuqatan. This is a verbal noun of ittaqa, and it is used as an emphasis, so that you are protecting yourself from the kuffar, a real protection. And this is in the case where you fear that the kuffar may kill you or harm you grievously, so that you fear for life or limb. Then in that case you can pretend to be their ally, but your heart is at ease with iman, and you have no love for them on account of the deen. So this is in the case of a necessity, where you fear real harm from them. And this would be a case where you're living in a land where the kuffar are dominant and they are enemies with the Muslimin. This ayah and the likes of it, such as in Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah 51, also Surah An-Nisa, ayah 144, also the opening of Surah Al-Mumtahana. These ayat are in place to teach the mu'minun that their love and their hatred is for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala, not for the sake of any of this worldly gain. Then he says, وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. حَذَّرَ يُحَذِّرُ تَحْذِيرًا, to warn. He warns you against his own self. This is to say, he warns you that he is able to take you to account and punish you if you step out of line. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ, and to Allah is the Masir, the place where you end up at, or the destination. From the verb sara, yasiru with a sad, meaning to become, as in to become something. So reflecting on this ayah, we take that one of the traits of the true believer is that he does not take a kafir as a close friend and an ally. Now one needs to be careful with this ayah. This ayah is not telling us to be aggressive to the kuffar or to fight them wherever you meet them. No. There's a difference between friend and friendly. The ayah is telling us not to take these kuffar as friends or close bosom buddies. That is true. However, the ayah does not say you're not allowed to be friendly with them. Rather, you are allowed to be friendly. Indeed, the Quran tells us that those kuffar who do not fight you on account of your deen, there is no sin upon you to be just with them and to do good to them. But as for close friends, then the mu'min only has other believers as close friends, because you are upon the deen of your friend. So you need to look at who your friends are, because their deen will be your deen. We also learn of the threat of such a person who commits this sin. He has nothing to do with the deen of Allah and nothing to do with Allah's protection. Now, is such a person a kafir? Well, some may say that yes, he is a kafir, because Allah says that he has nothing to do with the deen of Allah in aught, and this would be a kafir. And others can argue that this would be a weakness in his iman, but not necessarily an outright kafir. But the minimum that we can say is that this is a major sin, yes, and such a person is at least at a high risk of leaving the deen. But either way, repentance is required. We take that there is an exception where you can pretend to be from the allies of the kuffar, which is when you fear for life or limb. Now here, the Shia say that Ali radiallahu anh did not claim the Khilafah out of taqiyya, which is that he feared for himself. So he pretended to go along with the people. And this is from their extremely many corrupt beliefs, because then what they're saying is that they are in effect accusing Ali radiallahu anh of cowardice, because it's not like he was in danger of his life or limb being taken away. هذا والله أعلم.